Hello, and welcome to Sobercast, where we provide AA speaker meetings and workshops in podcast format. We're an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us be self-supporting by visiting Sobercast.com, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 into our virtual basket. We hope you enjoy the podcast. Have a great day.
Oh, Chris Alcoholic. I really want to thank Karen and her crew. This is really, everybody give Karen a hand. This really has been so well run. You know, there's so many little details that just make it extra special, and I certainly appreciate that. I go to some of these things, and I've seen when it's done poorly. You know, I remember one that I was at. I was there. Glenn was taping, and this was really just. It was one of those pause, one of the icky pause or something. I can't remember what it was, but I remember. You know, you usually get a host when you travel and you go somewhere, and you usually get a host. And this host that was supposed to be my host for the weekend took one look at me and just didn't like me or something. Just like look at me like. Oh, you're Chris. And I never saw her again, you know, for any help. And it was just dysfunctional. I remember they put Glenn down in the basement somewhere. It was just really crazy. And then there's been times when I've been given hosts that I had to ditch, you know. There's this one guy who just was following me around, just like 2 feet away from me, looking at me like every 2 seconds. Like, well, all right. So I started going, wait right here, I'll be right back. And I'd go all the way to the other side of the event. And, you know, when he finally found me, I'd go, hold on a minute, wait right here, I'll be right back. And I did that for like 2.5 days. Wow. Because it was driving me crazy. Anyway, became willing to have God remove these defects of character. You know, you've done a lot of things up to and through the fifth step that are real action items. You know, I keep beating on this, but it was you know, there's still so much trouble in this area, in the tri-state area, that I feel like I need to talk about it. Is so many people have a misunderstanding about these steps. Especially 4 and 5. I don't know where this came in. I think it came in from it could be partially from treatment. It could be partially from a misreading of the literature. But so often people think telling your fifth step is telling your story. And if you're telling your story, you're not learning anything. You're not sharing. You know, you're not. All you're doing is like regurgitating stuff that you already know. The fourth step really is about finding out what the heck is going wrong with us. You know, why do we have defective personal relationships? Why are we emotional disasters? Why do we have trepidation about sometimes the simplest things, like going into a store with fluorescent lights? Or something, or going to traffic court, you know. This one time I went to the Motor Vehicle Bureau over here in Wayne, New Jersey, to get my driver's license back from a third DUI. And you know, I just hate standing in line, and I don't like authority, and you know, it's a Motor Vehicle Bureau. I need to get a little confidence up. I'll have a couple of drinks. Now. So I actually get drunk to go get my license back for a third DUI. You know, I drive down to Wayne, you know what I mean? And now I've got my confidence back up. As a matter of fact, I'm cocky. And you know, I go up to this one, I go, I've got this, and this is notarized, and here's the check, and a money order, Now, give me the piece because she needed to give me a piece of paper so I could go downstairs and get my license. Now, give me the piece of paper. And she leans forward and she starts sniffing me. Like, she goes, "You've been drinking." I'm like, "No." She goes, "You stink like vodka. you're getting your license back for a third. Did you drive here? She said, no. Like she's got to give this back. I mean, legally she has to give me that piece of paper. I'm compliant, And so she hands it to me, and I grab it, and it turns into this like tug of war. She's thinking twice about it. I finally yank it out of her hands. Now think about how stupid that is. Now on a stupidity meter, that would be up there in the 9s. Now, do I really look like I'm that stupid of a person? It talks in our book about being driven by things, okay? When you suffer from alcoholism, you can be driven by fear. You can be driven by resentment. You can be driven by anxiety to do things. And I was driven to try to get rid of some of my anxiety so I could deal with motor vehicle, by taking a drink. Now, I need to see what the underlying causes and conditions are of these stupid things that I'm doing. So I need to inventory them. I need to share them with somebody else because that helps with perspective. And then I need to become willing to have these defects of character removed. It's not, it's not by coincidence that the 6th step is right after the 5th. I think once we've, written down this whole Megillah of how dysfunctional we are with our anger, our fear, and the harms that we've caused other people, and shared that, I think that's a time when we have at least a close perspective on what this stuff is doing to us and our life, and we can usually say, yeah, I'm willing to have God remove these defects of character. And on some levels, we really are. On some levels. It's why the step basically says if we're holding on to anything, we ask God for the strength to be able to let that go. Because there are things that we want to hang on to, and we may not always recognize this. But how about the work situation? If I become willing to have God take away, everything, and I turn that over to God, how am I going to keep my competitive edge? Or you're going to think that you're going to need to hold on to the decision making in your job. Well, how about if I become willing to have God let go of my lust? I don't know if I really want to do that because if I do that, I may never get laid again. And, hold on a minute with this stuff. Let's not go overboard. So there's levels that we're willing to let God in on. And I think that the prayer directive in step 6 is very, very important. I think it's important whenever there's a prayer directive. I think it's important for us to internalize that prayer and practice that prayer for however long it's appropriate to do so. One of the things I found in this program is the prayers that they ask you to do really work. They're transformative. They create the atmosphere for, or this perspective for, some real fundamental change, some real shifts in our awareness, and a lot of times in our behavior. So, okay, I've finished the 5th step. To the best of my ability at that particular time, I'm willing to have God remove these defects of character. In the old days, in the original manuscript, basically step 7 said, humbly, on our knees, ask God to remove these defects of character, holding nothing back. That was the original reading of the step. And again, the more you look at the history of early Alcoholics Anonymous, the more you see these guys on their knees. Some of the earlier members that are talking about how Dr. Bob worked with them is, Dr. Bob would get you on your knees for your 3rd step. He'd get you on your knees for your 7th step. You were up and down quite a bit. Because it's kind of an act of submission. Now, One of the mistakes I made with step 6 and 7, and I think a lot of people make this because a lot of people misunderstand their relationship to the things that are going on in their life. One of the mistakes I made was believing that I should be the one working on my own defects of character. When I went through my first, really poor attempt through the steps, I decided that, well, okay, I've done my 5th step, I'm going to work on my character defects. And I'm going to take some time and I'm going to, get better. I'm going to, start to fix myself a little bit. And it didn't work out that way. Has anybody in here tried to work on your own character defects? How did that work for you? Didn't work so well for me. If my alcoholism is like all-encompassing, it encompasses my attitude, it encompasses the behaviors and the thought processes that drive my actions, then, if I admit that I can change myself and I can fix my character defects just by wanting to, I'm misunderstanding alcoholism. And I'm misunderstanding this whole need for a power greater than myself. I think the steps are worded very, very carefully. If Bill Wilson did one thing, he was very careful with the language he used. There was numerous rewrites to the book Alcoholics Anonymous, especially the earlier chapters. And he was pretty specific about his language. And if he says, become willing to let God remove the character defects, and then humbly ask God to remove the character defects, I believe that God is going to be removing those character defects. What part do I need to play? There's a wonderful line in the 12 and 12, which basically says, God will not render you white as snow without your cooperation. And that's a very powerful sentence for me, because it basically says that I've got some responsibility in this too. I can't just say, God, take these defects of character away, thank you. And, wow, he didn't do it. I'm still an asshole. What's wrong with you, God? I think that there's participation that needs to happen. And, how then shall I participate for the removal of my character defects? I believe that the best possible atmosphere that we can place ourselves in for the removal of our character defects is to become willing to make amends where those defects have caused harm to the people and institutions who our defects have harmed, and then actually go out and make direct amends to those people, where these defects of character have caused harm, where our living life on self-will has caused harm. And I believe that it's all part of a process. And if we stall out or we stop on any particular step, like, hold on, I'm working on these character defects. I'm not going to be hasty moving into step 9. I still got some character defects to work on. I think if we do that, what happens is we short-circuit this beautiful process that's developed, in a certain way to get us to a spiritual awakening. And if we stop, if we stall out, what happens is a lot of times it's hard to get that momentum going again. Anybody that's stopped in the middle of a 4th step, or did a 4th step and waited a long time to do a 5th step, or never got their A step list down but never got out there, didn't right away go out there to start the amends, understands what I'm talking about. You get stalled out, and that can sometimes really mean disaster. Even if you don't drink, usually it means emotional disaster. You really start to suffer. So, here I am in the beginning. I'm trying to work on my character defects. And have you ever seen the game Whack-A-Mole, where you take the mallet and a mole will pop up from the hole, and you'll try to whack that mole, and you're about to whack that, and another mole will pop up, and another mole. It's never ending. They keep popping up. Well, that's what happened to me when I started to work on my own character defects. Okay, today I am not going to be selfish. And what happens is I'm self-obsessed, or I get really resentful, or there's just no way that I can control my emotional nature. I understood that in step one, but I'm trying to, because I'm working on my character defects. It was like playing whack-a-mole. So when I was working on my character defects, I was whacking the mole. And my sponsor came to me one time. He goes, Chris, if you keep whacking the mole, you could go blind. So, well, maybe one eye, Anyway, like, what am I doing? It's so often we lack the action necessary for recovery. Why burn it up on things that aren't directly related to our recovery process? One of the things that I see a lot around here, because we are pretty near, New York, is I see people that don't get into the step process but get into service. And you see them disappear into the service structures of Alcoholics Anonymous, never to be heard from again, They're like licking envelopes in some office somewhere. And, have you gone to the steps? Have you read the chapter Working with Others? Are you doing what it's asking you to do in that chapter Working with Others? Or is your program completely unbalanced? All you're doing is service. So often we get caught up in all this because we lack the balance or the understanding of a true program of recovery. And the way the Big Book lays it out is really perfect. So anyway, okay, I'm willing to have God remove these character defects. I've made the demonstration. I've done the affirmation prayer. God, please remove these defects of character. We've all done the seventh-step prayer a million times. Now I need to start on my 8-step list. A lot of it should already be done because a lot of it is coming off of our 4-step list. And if we've got a really good sponsor, somebody like Chris, they're helping by, finding patterns, finding the things that you might just conveniently be missing, like a huge bunch of amends, and they'll be able to help you out with that, and start to put a list together. Now, what I like to do, and again, I'm not a slave to any specific mechanics as far as the recovery process is concerned. I really don't care what kind of a form. I don't care if you go up and down or sideways. I really don't care as long as you're answering the questions the book asks you to answer, and as long as you're complying with the instructions in the book. I'm kind of unconcerned about what type of mechanics you're using. But what I like to use on the 8-step is basically 8-step cards. I like the 5x7 cards, and I like to take all the amends that I've become aware of from the 4-step, from the 5th step, maybe from the hour quiet time, asking myself if I've left anything out, maybe from some of the 6-step stuff that my sponsor has pointed out, and I like to put them on cards. I like to put the person or the institution that I need to make amends to. I like to put their name. I like to put how to contact them, the harm that I'm clear on. Now, so often we get this part wrong. You don't want to put something down like I was a jerk. That's just way too broad. We need to be specific about what our actions were. Because when we go to make amends, we're going to want to be making amends for specific things that we've seen that have caused harm. We don't want to be so general that we don't get to the point. So I like to write down, what it is, what the harm I'm clear on. And then I like to check these cards. Today, I'm not saying I always check the cards, but certainly if it's your first time through amends, or if you're unsure of anything, it's a good idea to check with a sponsor or a spiritual advisor who's experienced with actually doing the 9th step. Okay? Not that there are people that sponsor out there that haven't done the 9th step. I'm not saying that. This is New Jersey. Anyway, check to make sure that the approach is the first contact with the individual. Make sure that that's going to be an appropriate approach, and then kind of talk about what the amends should look like. Okay, what should be involved in that amends? If it's money, then you make the best deal you can. There's a lot of great information in our book about making amends. It's a really good thing to be thorough about studying that before you go out and make amends. It's also good to get some advice from someone with experience, a sponsor or a spiritual advisor with experience before you go out and make amends. I've seen people really screw this up. And one of the things you don't want to do is to have to go back and make an amends for doing a crappy amends. It's bad enough you got to do one. Make sure that you're not fouling it up. Now, it says, except when to do so will injure them or others. That's one of the things that you really need to go over with an experienced AA, whether it's a sponsor, spiritual advisor, whatever, someone that has experience doing those kind of amends. Because if your sponsor's never done an amends to the IRS, sometimes it's a good idea to go and talk to somebody who's done an amends to the IRS. You want to see kind of what's coming. You want to be a little bit prepared. You want to be as appropriate as possible in any given situation. But you need to prepare a little bit for this. Now, amends, in my experience, are the things that really put muscle in your recovery. I am telling you, they add so much power to your ability to deal with life when you're clear on these and when you're as complete as you can be. It's unfortunate today that there are sponsors out there that give you a pass on amends that you're really supposed to make. You really should be making. They're going to give you a pass. They'll say something like, "Kid, you don't go back to any of the old girlfriends or relationships and make amends. I don't want you doing that." Oh my God, that's where that whole area of your life has been Agent Oranged. It's just been, every relationship you've had has gone down like the Hindenburg, and you're just going to not pay any attention to it. There are people who are experienced, and there are people who are giving you what they have. They're transmitting what they have, which is very little experience with the ninth step. You need to be careful about, who you choose to help guide you through this, because this is about freedom. Not only freedom, this is about setting right the wrongs. Doing our best to set right the wrongs. And really to feel comfortable in your own skin and with yourself and with your environment. It's vitally important that we address steps 8 and 9 to the best of our ability, and to do the ones that are appropriate to do. The longer I'm sober, the more times that I go through the steps, the more I see that more amends need to be taken care of rather than less. I just need to learn how to appropriately take care of these amends. Let's say it's an amends to an ex-girlfriend from 20 years ago. All right, you don't just go over to their house, find out where she lives, go over to her house, knock on her door, and her husband comes out, and you say, "Can I see Judy for a minute? I need to make a ninth step for some sex harms." There's ways not to do this. There's ways not to do this. There's ways to keep from, causing more harm and more contention and more problems. And, we have to be tactful. We have to be very, very tactful with these. But in the book, there's examples of making an amends to the man you still hate. Here's something that I was not happy about finding in the book. When I found this out, I wasn't really happy. I'm really expected to go back and make amends to the man that I hated. So I immediately start figuring out why I don't really need to do this. Well, I didn't really hate him, and, I'm over that now. And no, read the black part. The great thing about making the amends to the man you still hate is that nothing will be more significant in an amends than something like that. That is going to help you more than anything. I had an amends I had to do. It was an individual who, at least in my perception at that time, really harmed me. And in my perception, I did very, very little, maybe 5% to cause that harm. If I set myself up, it was, it wasn't on purpose, and this guy did it. And I was able to really justify that this guy was way, way, way in the wrong. And I was figuring out how, it's all this guy's problem. Why do I need to make amends? It just doesn't make any sense to me. What am I going to do? And I'm reading the book, and it basically says you go back to the person, confessing your former ill feelings, and expressing your willingness to move forward. And I'm like, oh my God! So this resentment, because it was a resentment, this resentment just was starting to get worse and worse and worse. And finally, it says, take the bit in your teeth. Basically what that means is just go do it. Stop rationalizing, stop dodging and weaving, and just go do it. And I did. I called the individual up, I met with him, and I made the amends. And it was really not a whole lot of fun doing this with this individual, because I still really felt like, I had been really wronged. Got done the amends, shook hands, said goodbye to each other, and when he walked away, this is what happened. I didn't hate him anymore. I wasn't resentful at this individual anymore. I was free of this poison that was living inside my body, this resentment. There's a lot of things in the book. There's in the stories, there's like freedom from bondage, and you pray for the person 50 times a day for 6 months or whatever. Well, how about doing what the program says? Because I've heard that shared in so many discussion meetings, it makes me ill. And rarely do you hear somebody share their experience about taking the bit in their teeth and going to the man they hate, confessing their former ill feeling. That's what you're supposed to do. And by doing that, I didn't want to do it, and I put it off for a long, long time until I just wasn't willing to feel as emotionally and spiritually ill as I was. When I went and did it and I found out that I got freedom in it, I started to understand a little bit about this process. This process isn't about going to somebody and telling them that you're small, groveling or apologizing or whatever. Sometimes an apology is appropriate. It's about trying to set right the wrong, absolutely, but it's also about freedom. It's about emotional freedom. It's about freedom from that bondage of self that is going to kill me. My selfishness, my self-centeredness is what's going to kill me. One of the great things in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I always get this wrong. I think it's warranty number 6 from the 12th concept. There'll be some service people that would maybe correct me, but anyway, it basically states that there can be no punitive action against an AA group or an AA member for infractions. In other words, when we fall short, we are not to be. There's no punitive actions that can be taken against us. We have a right to be wrong. And the reason why that principle was put in is basically because we don't really need AA or AA members to punish us. Because that's what punitive action is. That means you're going to be punished. Alcohol punishes us. And if we fail to practice these principles, if we fail to go through these steps and actually take these steps, and we're really a hopeless alcoholic, what's going to happen is, the punishment is going to come from a return to drinking. We don't need to really police anybody in here as far as that's concerned. Alcohol is the great taskmaster. There's a section in Step 9 that talks about criminal offenses. It says in that we must be willing to go to jail if we have to. Now, it doesn't necessarily say that we need to go to jail. It says we need to be willing to go to jail if that's how far we have to go. And I've worked this amends out with a lot of people, and only on one occasion have I seen somebody go to jail for an amends they made. And they knew they were going to do it. They knew it was going to be jail anyway. They had to go back to Colorado and go to court for 3 open felonies that they fled to avoid prosecution on. But by turning himself in, instead of getting 15 years, he got like 7 months and some parole. So it was a smart move. But these criminal offenses, it basically says in this part of Step 9, we need to be willing to do this, because if we're not, we're going to stand in front of our Creator guilty of ruinous slander, they say in this one example. But we're going to be standing in front of our Creator guilty and not being willing to set right this wrong. Now, there's a spiritual connection to that. This goes back thousands and thousands of years. In the Christian tradition, it basically says, before you go and pray and give alms to God, make sure that there's no problem between you and your fellow man. And you'll find this in spiritual traditions across the board. You'll find it in all religions and all decent philosophies, that we need to be right with our fellow man. Never more so than if you're an alcoholic. Because not being right with somebody as an alcoholic, it can be a death sentence. For somebody that's not alcoholic, it can just be a problem. But for us, we really do need to be right with our fellow man, especially the people that we've harmed, especially when we've, really committed some crimes. Now, I've gone back to places and I've admitted stealing from them. I've done a lot of those type of amends. Never once did they say, "You scumbag, I'm calling the cops." That's usually not the reaction. In this chapter, it says 9 times out of 10, the unexpected happens. We get a more generous response from our amends than we expect. Is anybody in here like me, who, what I do is I predict a disaster? I know I've done this type of an amends 75 times before, and it's always been good. But this time, I know I'm going to go to jail or feel small or whatever. What it is it's an expectation of a negative reaction. And 9 times out of 10, we get a better reaction than we think we're going to get. These things aren't. You're not supposed to be afraid to do this. These are to help us get right with our world, with ourself, with our fellow man, and with God. And those are all relationships that need to be right for us to be able to maintain our spiritual condition. Because God cannot render us white as snow without our cooperation. Part of the cooperation is the willingness to set right the wrongs. Now there's the amends that they talk about stepping out on the misses. You know what I mean? Being unfaithful. There's probably nobody in here that has ever had to worry about an amends like that, right? The general philosophy of this amends is very telling. This is really where except when to do so would injure them or others comes into the philosophy of the step. it basically says in this, if the person doesn't know that you've been unfaithful, does it make any sense at all to tell them? Does it make any sense at all to tell them who you were unfaithful with so that they can go, beat the crap out of them? Is this going to do anybody any good? That question is asked. Then it says, if they know a little bit, if they suspect a little bit, we might need to admit that we've been wild, but that God willing, it's not going to happen again, and we're sorry for what we have done, and we're really going to make an effort to not let it happen in the past. And this is kind of what you need to do. Now, I've seen this go so awry, you have no idea. This one guy I was working with, who was, going through the steps pretty quickly, but I told him, look, I want to see all of your 8th step cards. I want to go over all this with you. He decided that he needed to go to his wife and tell his wife about the 3 affairs he had over the last 10 years. He needed to get this off his chest. Now, needing to get it off his chest, is that really spiritual? When we're supposed to be placing the welfare of others before the welfare of ourselves? That can't possibly be the right attitude. And did it go awry? You have no idea. There's like 5% of the domestic violence cases are men that get the crap kicked out of them. This was one of them, okay? He got the crap kicked out of him. He was in the hospital for a while. Not only that, but because he told her who those people were, she instituted lawsuits against them for having unprotected sex with her husband, and not alerting her. She was a psychopathic attorney. And this poor guy, had to deal with this for like years. And, if he would have just paid attention to the attitude that you're supposed to have, the understanding of this step, we don't sweep our side of the street off and load the garbage onto somebody else's side. That's not where. Honey, I need to tell you. The last 10 babysitters. I had my way with 8 of them. God, I feel better getting that off my chest. So we need to be very, very careful. Jealousy is a terrible human emotion. We need to be very, very careful with that. How many times have we heard the 9th step promises read? We'll know a new freedom and new habits. How many times have we walked into an AA room and they're up on the wall, the promises, just the 12 promises? If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, what phase of our development? Amends. We'll be amazed before we're halfway through. Halfway through what? Halfway through your amends list or your amends cards or however you do it. They're significant promises. Knowing a new freedom and a new happiness. Not wishing to shut the door on the past. They're amazing promises. And when you look at page 52, you look at the bedevilments on page 52. Not being in control of your emotional nature, being prey to misery and depression. You look at those, and then you look at the 9th step promises. You look at the spiritual malady is starting to be healed. You're looking at 9th step. The 9th step is starting to heal your spirit. And it's vitally important for us to get to this part. One of the things that I've observed in Alcoholics Anonymous over the years, and I've been around, I've seen 1 million people come and go, is that if you don't put enough into Alcoholics Anonymous and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12-step program, if you don't put enough in, you're not going to get enough power back in your life to be able to stay. How many people leave AA? I'm looking around the room tonight, and there's 4 people from the original year, the year that we started the Burnsville Spiritual Awakenings group. There's 4 people in this room that were home group members of that, and there's a lot of people that have gone there through the years, but there's only 4 people in this room that are from that group. Where did everybody go? There's a lot of people that are gone. If you look at the turnover in Alcoholics Anonymous, you see a massive amount of people coming and going. The people, though, that stay, that are rooted in, like a tick, those people are the people who have a balanced recovery, consistent with meeting attendance, work the steps with a sponsor or spiritual advisor, and then find ways to be of help to other alcoholics, sponsoring other people. That's vitally important if you want to be able to stay here. Many of the people that disappear out of AA, a lot of times they're heavy drinkers anyway, and it's not a big disaster, and the house doesn't blow up, and, they don't come running back in the next day with their pants on fire. I got 4 DWIs and thrown out of the house. That doesn't necessarily happen every time, because a lot of people get here, who really, really don't need to be here. But it's sad when you see an alcoholic leave AA because of a lack of participation. I don't know about you, but if I don't participate enough in this, I don't stay. For one reason or another, I don't stay. That happened to me my first exposure to AA. I did what Dr. Bob did in the Oxford group. I came late, I left early, and my God, I didn't want you to know who I was. And I didn't share, and I didn't get phone numbers. And what happened was I only stayed about 2 months, and then I disappeared. I found reasons to not go. So we need to do enough in AA to be able to get enough power back from AA to be able to stay. I do some LinkedIn work. I'm active on LinkedIn, and I'm linked with a lot of treatment professionals and addiction treatment groups on this LinkedIn. And I was going back and forth with this one guy about something, trying to prove a point, and he came back to me with a statistic. And this statistic really infuriated me. But like a lot of things, that's good because it makes you think. Now, what he said was, he goes, listen, there's been studies done on Alcoholics Anonymous that show there's about a 6% success rate. That would be about the same success rate as if you gave someone a placebo. Now think about that. That's what those are the type of statistics this guy is quoting. And I started to think, oh my God, the AA I know is rarely has a person failed who's thoroughly followed the path. What is this? Let me look at this. And I started to think about it, and I started to look into these statistics and how they were compiled. Somebody goes up to an AA meeting location and catches people walking out the door and does a little survey. Okay, how long are you sober? Have you really? And they put these statistics together. Now, what they're measuring is people showing up at AA meetings. They're not measuring the success of Alcoholics Anonymous. They're measuring who shows up at the door of the meetings. Now think about this. First of all, AA is a 12-step program. If you haven't taken the 12 steps, you can't claim to have tried AA. You might have sat in a few meetings, but that's not trying AA. Now think about this. If I was doing statistics on heart surgeries, and I went to a hospital where a lot of people go into the waiting room but never leave the waiting room because they get scared of the operation and they leave, and I start seeing what kind of mortality rate is happening at this hospital, yet I'm not measuring the people that go in for the operations, I'm just measuring the people that walk through the door. Would that be accurate? Could you hold the hospital accountable to those negative statistics if the people aren't compliant with the treatment process? I don't think so. I don't think that would be fair. But that's what gets done to us with these statistics. They don't come in here and ask you, have you done all 12 steps? Have you made all of your amends? They're not going to ask those questions. They're going to ask you, how long have you been in AA? How long have you been in the program? Because they just don't know any better. And if you look at the statistics that way, yeah, we've got really crappy statistics. 19 out of 20 people that walk in the door of AA are not going to make it. But you have to look at the reason. The reason is they're sitting in the waiting room and they never go in for the operation. The operation is the 12 steps. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has done these. No step is more significant than step 9. If you have some trepidation about step 9, if you've got some resistance, if you've got some fear as far as some unfinished amends, or as far as really being honest with an amends list and then going out and making direct amends, understand one thing: you are cheating yourself. You are cheating yourself of an unbelievable experience. The difference between finishing to the best of your ability all your approaches, some amends just aren't done. It says in I think it's the chapter to the family afterward, you're not going to be able to set right this in a lifetime. A lot of times that's the way it is with family. And you really need to do a living amends with that particular family member by just being, well, it's not even an amends, it's just practicing the principles with those people. Being the right kind of a person. You're not going to be able to set that right in a lifetime. However, you can finish these approaches. You can do the best you can in an amount of time. And the difference between actually having finished those amends and not having finished those amends is a big one. Ask anybody who just finished their last amends how they feel. It's a quantum shift spiritually. So if you're holding on to some amends, if you're just not going to go back to that son of a bitch, please rethink that. Please rethink that. Please start a prayer regimen where basically you ask God for the strength and direction to go out and make that amends, because it will come if you continue to ask for it and have the right attitude. Please do that. Please do that. In AA, we are really being taught how to sponsor. If you aren't diligent about going through your amends, that's going to come out when you work with other people. You're going to transmit that incomplete experience to other people. So I know everyone in here really wants to be of help, and I'll bet you pretty much most of us want to be good sponsors, want to be the best sponsors we can be. What we need for that to actually happen is for us to actually go through these steps and complete them and become compliant with the spiritual processes that they're asking us to become compliant with. When you do that, you become an awesome sponsor. You get, a sense of direction comes into you like you wouldn't even believe. The direction from God becomes accessible when you're working with other people. Somebody will come to me and they'll have like this god-awful nightmare situation going on, and without even thinking, here's what I think you should do. And it's like the right action, and it's almost like it's coming through me. It's not coming from me. And it comes from being an enlightened and an experienced Alcoholics Anonymous member, and that comes from experience with the steps. So please, I'll ask anybody in here who still has some unfinished amends to make a commitment this weekend. Make a commitment to someone else in this room and say, hey, I want to make a commitment to you. I've got 3 unfinished amends. Will you help me be accountable for finishing those? I've found that that's really helpful. Because if we're the only ones that know we've got 3 unfinished amends, we're in trouble. So become accountable to some people here. today. This is a great group of people. This is one of the best workshops I've been a part of. I've got my heroes here. God bless all of you.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Sobercast is ad-free, and we'd like your help in order to keep it that way. So if you'd like to help us be self-supporting by pledging $1 or $2 a month, visit Sobercast.com and look for the donate links. Thank you very much.